Marine Protected Area, MPA, is a section of the ocean where the government has placed limits on human activity. MPAs have been established because the ocean and the things that live in it face many dangers. Threats to the ocean include overfishing, litter, water pollution, and global climate change. These threats have caused a decline in the population of many fish, marine animals, and other sea creatures.
The establishment and the maintenance of the MPA was divided in two phases. The first phase, which we are nearly close to finish, 3 years, involved the environmental monitoring and marine resources assessment in the MPA. As KISR was contracted to conduct the short-term scientific monitoring of the 3 years, the program was aimed at securing baseline information for the long-term conservation of the MPA.
Both the number of MPAs and size of protected areas have increased worldwide in recent decades. The number of countries that protect their coastal marine areas has also increased, which demonstrates that MPAs are an instrument that is increasingly used by governments. MPAs are established to achieve different goals, the most important being conservation of biodiversity and sustainability of marine resources.
To sample the intertidal area, we need to select the suitable date and time for that, because we need to cover the whole area of intertidal with all its zonations from the lowest tide to the high tide. That's why we need to check the Kuwait's tide table from different resources to check the suitable time and date of the lowest tide when the tidal height is 0 and below. This is very important for us, and this has always happened during the spring tide, which we call it in Kuwait al-Hamel. The different zonations in the intertidal area can be sandy, rocky, and muddy, or mixed of the different substrates. We did 3 transects for sampling, named as MBA1, MBA2, and MBA3. MBA2 located inside the marine protected area, and MBA1 and MBA3 are at each side of the marine protected area. When we walk from the lowest tide to the high tide, we can see the different zonations and different sites with different habitats. In the lowest tide, there is the muddy substrate, and then after the muddy substrate, we can see here is a hard substrate. When you walk, you can feel of the hard substrate and distributed rocks inside that hard substrate, which represent a habitat of different species than the species found in the muddy sites or the sandy sites. The difficult one is the muddy substrate, because for sample this area, we required a special technique which we created by using a surfboard and a crawl on the board or scum on the board.
To compensate for ecological services lost during the Iraqi invasion in 1990 and 1991, the United Nations Compensation Committee awarded Kuwait a project to establish and operate a marine protected area in the shallow subtidal and intertidal expanses of western صليبيخات Bay. Based on scientific assessments, it was recommended that a reserve of 280 hectares in extent and operated for a period of 15 years would compensate for the lost ecological services.
For example, the soft substrate like the sandy or the muddy sites, we require a metal box corer like this, okay, which is designed to be 25 by 25 with 15 centimeter depth, where the bulletproof usually live. After we fix the corer tightly, we need to take all the mud samples which reach that depth inside the bucket. As you see here, that the member staff bring the mud samples, the quantitative one using the corer, which I explained before. They brought it from reaching the sampling site in the low tide zonation. Here we can see some polychaetes, which are the marine worms that live in the muddy area. And also when we wash the mud, of course, we will find more micro species from other groups.
One of the main aspects of setting up this marine protected area is to conserve the biodiversity within the صليبيخات-based system. So the marine protected area project is executed under different tasks. So as part of the task 4, that is a plankton survey, we do the documentation, the photo documentation and other characteristics of plankton in our waterways here. The phytoplankton are the microscopic plants and zooplankton are the microscopic animals. And these two groups form the base of the marine food web, and that will really affect the other components in the ecosystem, especially the fish larval survival and their distribution.
In and around the MPA was initiated in October 2018 under the aegis of United Nations Compensation Commission and the Kuwait National Focal Point.
We have been collecting samples for the last 36 months from the marine protected area. That included the subtidal and the intertidal zone. The marine protected area was chosen in صليبيخات Bay because it's a very commercial important to Kuwait, and it's close to the urban area, and it's a very stressful environment as well. The outcome is for this phase of the project, which is 3 years, and we are ending the first phase, is very crucial and important because it will help us to understand and establish the long-term management plan in the area.
We deploy CTD to collect oceanography data.
From October 2018 until March 2021, our scientific monitoring has generated invaluable information on the environmental scenario and the flora and fauna that inhabit the intertidal and subtidal habitats of the MPA and surrounding areas. The generated baseline marine data includes the plankton, benthos, fish stocks, historical coastal line changes, submerged vegetation, and birds that visit MPA and surrounding waters.
This is the intertidal area. It is at low tide, and this area is very important for the birds. It attracts birds to feed on this area. Each bird has its own habitat preference.
Plankton surveys revealed rich biodiversity of phytoplankton, zooplankton, and fish larvae with specific seasonal patterns. The benthic surveys revealed rich biodiversity of bottom-living marine invertebrates in the area between the high tide and the low tide levels and at the sea bottom of the صليبيخات Marine Protected Area and surrounding waters. Many species new to the state of Kuwait were discovered.
for the quantitative sample for the rocky area, we need to collect all the animals inside this frame. So if we have big rocks inside the frame and we have no time to do it here, okay, we can take the rock with us into the lab, okay? And then we analyze the samples in the lab by putting the bucket in the seawater overnight to make no oxygen for them, so all the animals inside the rock, the small one, can be out. We always check for any species that we can collect it for documentation and identification for the macrofauna species which found in the area. The intertidal area of صليبيخات Bay is characterized by the intertidal mudflats that supports and provide a shelter, nursery, spawning, and feeding backgrounds for a variety of fauna and flora, which means animals and plants, including many of commercial important species such as fishes and shrimps. These fauna and flora function as a vital links in the marine food web by processing the detritus and serving as an essential diet for fishes and other marine animals, as well as for the birds and even directly to humans. The investigation of the intertidal and subtidal macrofauna and bird species biodiversity are an important tasks of the project.
Part of the subtidal sampling that we have conducted in 5 stations in the MPA area is task 3, which is the chemistry and chemistry analysis. We are in the chemistry lab now, and as you can see in the back, we always conduct some important and essential analysis and measurements when we receive the samples. That includes filtration, fixation, for a later on analysis for the parameters, including the nutrients. In addition, we measure some of the parameters that we have already measured in the field, in the laboratory, just to compare and to calibrate our senses that we have used in the field.
To count the crab, which the main key species in the muddy area, we need the quadrate of 50 by 50 to be used for sample, the quantitative samples for the crab, so we can double check the countings of the burrows. And here I will make lines of the quadrates, so then I can carefully collect all the crabs inside this quadrate. We collected all the crabs inside this area. Here is the high tide zonation of the marine protected area of الصليبيخات Bay. You can see here, this is all the mangrove which are planted by Kisser and which create another habitat for different species. After the field sampling of intertidal and subtidal fauna, the collected samples were washed, sieved, and also we sorted the collected animals up to group levels and then fixed them for the identification step. For each identified fauna, we need to have approved pictures for it. So we need to take pictures with focusing on the main features for each animal that assists in identifying that animal. In order to assess the status of the marine protected area of الصليبيخات Bay, we need to generate a national quantitative and qualitative data to serve as a baseline database for any future environmental change that could happen. Moreover, this data can help to assess the general health of the marine ecosystem, as many species of macrofauna, such as the marine worms, can serve as a sensitive monitor of the water quality, and some species can serve as a bioindicator of any polluted area, and also some species can be used as an ecological index. The resulting data will also help to identify the main key species that live in the marine protected area.
Fishery surveys yielded invaluable information on the most dominant and commercially important pelagic and benthic fish stocks inside the bay. Habitat mapping revealed bottom sediment characteristics and the absence of submerged vegetation. High-resolution grid surveys conducted inside the bay revealed the influence of anthropogenic point resources on hydrographical characteristics of the MPA and surrounding waters. Remote sensing data since 2003 has suggested substantial modifications of coastline and significant tidal flat development inside the MPA post-2020. Once all the data sets are processed, information from various tasks will be integrated, biotic-abiotic interactions, and to identify keystone species in the MPA. The information generated will be gathered in a centralized data management system for the MPA, which will be used during the 12-year long-term monitoring program, which constitutes the second phase of the project. Based on the outcomes of the short-term monitoring program, the Marine Protected Area Long-Term Management Plan, LTMP, will have multiple objectives, including protection of representative habitats, conservation of rare species, fish stock restoration or enhancement, and safeguarding of specific sites zones, among others that help in the management of the MPA and the صليبيخات Bay region. During the long-term management plan, specific management activities for the marine protected area, including recreation, tourism, education, and specific sites for scientific exploration will be launched. The performance of the marine protected area will be evaluated through regular monitoring and periodic assessments, with contributions from many stakeholders, since correctly managed MPAs maximize the health and productivity of the marine environment and help us achieve the very objective of establishing the very first marine protected area in Kuwaiti waters.
We were delighted, honored to work in the Marine Protected Area project, the first phase of the project. The amount of the data, the amount of biological samples that we have seen and documented, very useful, and it's very important to prepare the long-term management plan. We are very grateful and thankful to the funders, and we hope that this phase of the project will help in the conservation of the marine environment in Kuwait, especially that this is a new marine protected area.